All right. Thank you for joining us for the 23rd episode of Building the Athlete. I'm your host, Scott Benson, powered by Benson Sports Training. Today's guest, we've got Riley Weselowski, head coach of the Cincinnati Cyclones. Riley, thanks for being with us today.
It's awesome to be here, Scotty. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, we've been trying to get together for a while on this. Just kind of I guess, a quick intro. We've known each other for a long time through your professional playing days. You had a lengthy professional career with a CHL championship back in 2010. Then I believe 2011, you were the CHL Defensive Player of the Year, CHL Man of the Year. Through your playing career, we stayed in touch, trained together quite a bit. And now you've just completed your first year as a head coach with the Cincinnati Cyclones. So tell me, what type of an adjustment was that in your life to go from professional player to professional coach?
Yeah, definitely an adjustment. It was uh, it was a challenge, but I feel like it was one of those ones that I had been preparing for about 4 or 5 years before it actually happened. So that made the adjustment a little bit easier. I'd say probably around 2015, 2016, I started to I knew I was close to coach. I started looking for coaching opportunities. I knew I wanted to be a little bit picky in terms of organizations that I was a part of, and so it wasn't just kind of blasting my name out. And I needed to be done now, and owe a lot of that ability to be able to stretch out my career as long as I did to you and to Benson Sports Training, just because that element of my training allowed me to play until my mid 30s, which at the minor pro level, not a lot of players are able to do. And so there was an adjustment for sure, and some good, some bad, like the the way your body feels, and that was probably the part that dragged on me the most near the end of my career. It wasn't. It was the amount of preparation into your body that it takes at that age to be able to perform, and when you have other obligations in terms of uh, family life. And then at the minor pro level, it's running other businesses. And I run hockey camps in the summer and all that stuff that goes into it. That when you have all that stuff to think about, those 2 to 3 hours a night sitting on the floor, foam rolling, stretching, and all that extra work that goes into it just to prepare yourself for the next day becomes a lot. And so I was ready to transition, and I was also fortunate to be able to jump into a good organization when I did.
Yeah, and I know we've had this conversation before. You run what I would call very successful hockey camps during the summer, and probably could have gone that direction after your playing career. What kept you in the game wanting to be, a head coach? What drove you to that point?
Yeah, I love the professional hockey side of things. I love working with that. I love working with a group of guys that are trying to get to the next level, that are trying to strive to be the best in the world. And I love the planning element. I love um, the strategic element that goes into professional hockey. And so it was one of those things getting into pro that I was a finance major at Bemidji State. I had great grades. I had really good job offers coming out of college, and and I had that kind of itch that I was like, I want to play 1 year of pro just to say that I did it. And I had an injury my first year. I tore my knee with 20 games left, and I was like, oh, I got to play another year. And then my second year came back, and I had a fractured vertebrae in my back the first game of the season, and I was out until about January, which led me to Rapid City, which I was going to go to Rapid City, and I thought, oh, I just go here for a few months, play the year out, and that's the year we won the championship in Rapid City. And so that led me to being like, I never want to leave this place. I absolutely loved it. At the time in Rapid City, we were selling out every game, and it was an unbelievable place to play. I met a lot of really good people in that community. I stayed there in the summers, and it was a great time in my life. And it was just a natural transition, I guess, for me to want to just be involved in pro hockey. And then at some point along there, it was one of those things where, okay, now I love to play, but I think I'm going to love to coach even more. And it's been, without question, it's been the case. I loved it when I was playing, but coaching these professionals is definitely is I'm where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah. And coming into a, as a head coach of a professional team, how do you come in that first year and I mean, number one, command respect from the players? Does your kind of your resume as a player, did that help you step into that position and have that respect immediately? Or, how has that transition been?
Yeah, there's definitely a transition. I was fortunate that probably the more unnatural transition it was the first year into assistant coaching in Kansas City when I took that job, because you're right out of that in that player. Now, again, probably something that was a positive for me was I was going to a new organization where I didn't know any uh, of the players. I hadn't, played with any of them. I played against a few of them, but also like you think you know a lot when you're getting into it, but what you learn very quickly just how much you don't know. But then, being in that organization, we took an organization over 4 years that in Kansas City that really hadn't been that um, a perennial success. They had a few doses of success here and there, but not a perennial success. And we really turned that organization into a team now that's one of the top organizations in the ECHL. So I had that experience and I had that confidence to know kind of the blueprint to get there. Worked under an extremely good head coach, extremely detailed. Not even so much in terms of the on ice part of hockey team, but the builder element of it, like knowing what it takes to put together a winning organization and all the details that go into it. So coming into this job for me, I had the confidence because I had been there, done that already in Kansas City. And again, major props to Tad O'Had in Kansas City, but giving me the like we did everything together. We did everything together. And so it was something that moved into this position with a ton of confidence, knowing that I had already done it. And so it's just now going here to be able to do it and make my own mark on things.
Yeah. So it sounds like he was a good mentor who, purposely brought you along and taught you a lot of things. Is that something you're kind of, applying to your situation now with your assistant coaches?
Yeah, and we're in a spot here with so I have the same thing where I've got a first year assistant coach and And so I think what's great about that is there's a lot of areas that I can relate to him in terms of like coming into a situation. Now, Tad was a second year head coach by the time I got there, but our situations are a lot very similar. And so you recognize the areas in your growth as a coach that really helped you, and trying to apply those in the um, in bringing him along, because there's an adjustment without question. Now he has that added challenge that I kind of mentioned earlier, where he was in an organization that he had played with some of the guys on the team the year prior, and so like a couple of different hurdles that way. But he's done a great job, and yeah, just the experience that I had and having somebody like Tad that helped me the first few years, and also being able to evolve within that. Like I was an assistant coach, but then by year three promoted to an associate head coach, and so like I said, we were able to do that stuff together a lot. And so to have that perspective was super helpful for me, and is helpful probably for my assistant coach here.
Yeah. So how would you say the first year went? How'd the team do?
Yeah, our team, it was a year of growth. It was a year of growth, and we knew we needed to build. And the ECHL is a unique league in the sense that a lot of our work in terms of recruitment, and this is a big recruiting league, like where you've got your NCAA, where everything is on recruiting, right? You got your professional hockey at the NHL level, where everything is on your draft. And so you do poorly in your league, you get the first overall pick. That's how you bring your guys in. Well, our level is a lot like the NCAA's, where you build a program that people want to be a part of, and then you have your wave of incoming players at the end of the year, which is when college seasons are done, college and junior seasons, which is February, March, and then even into April to do your recruiting. And so for us coming into this situation here, we missed that window, and that's where you get a lot of players, right? And so we had some summer recruiting, but a lot of your summer recruiting is on that organizational reputation that you really don't have a part of yet. And so we knew that it was going to be a year of building, and that's what we did. I mean, we turned over a lot of our roster. We put in uh, a lot of systems and structure and relationships with our affiliate in place. We're affiliated with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and so it was very successful in that regards. We missed the playoffs by 4 points, but also we weren't ready to be a playoff team yet, and so it was a success in not the maybe traditional sense of what it will be, hopefully in a year or two. But it was a success in terms of like what we've started to build here.
Good. So, I mean, knowing you as an athlete and really just as a human being, you're one of the most committed and you just always had a plan for everything that you did as an athlete. You always kind of had that roadmap and that discipline and that commitment. How much of that, you know, I guess, do you relate to as a coach now?
Uh, a lot for sure. I mean, to this, you are at this level, and especially at this level more than anything, the coaching element is such a small part of it. What people would perceive the coaching, like what is a coach, what people would perceive that, I would say that's probably 10-15% of what we actually do and what's important here. And anybody that's built a business probably knows that as well. But at this level, I mean, I mean, right now that this morning, just we spent the morning talking about, like with our budgets, we talked about with our equipment manager on our apparel. We're going through a full renovation of a practice rink. And so like as a coach now, it's building out your locker rooms. It's setting up, whether it's your paint colors and your what were the buzzwords you want on your walls, and where you want this quote to be plastered on your wall, and pictures of players, and that's just on a today on a random Wednesday, right? And then tomorrow it's going to be about our apartments, because you've got to house the players. And so like we knew we had to up the level of our apartments, right? And so like the details of where's our apartments going to be located, the deals you can get on your apartments, the furniture, all the things that goes into that. Then you're dealing with immigration the next day, and then you're dealing with your player payroll the next day. And so there's so many different elements that go into it, that you have to be extremely hungry and focused for, because if you're not, it can be extremely it's difficult to be good at it. That's what I would say. And you have to be you described it in terms of like that drive that you have to have that, and you have to have that in so many of the most boring areas that people would look at and be like, man, that does not sound fun to do it. And you have to love doing it, because otherwise it's just not going to work.
Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned that early on is that you kind of like that stuff. You kind of like the organizational side of it and being on top of all that. How much of it, with my experience, with the majority of the athletes and the majority of coaching I've done is at the high school level. And, I've always said that the X's and O's are really like you just said, 10 to 15%. And, the rest of it is that relationship building where, these guys and girls in my case, they have to know that they can trust me and that I've got their back, and then they'll do the work for me. At the professional level, how much of the time do you spend building relationships with the players?
It's huge. It's imperative. You're 100%. They have to trust you. And I'd say that is, if there's no question, like there is an element of that coming in as a first year head coach. Like you have to earn that trust. We have half of our players that are coming down from the American Hockey League, right? And so like the head coach in the American Hockey League is a guy that has been an assistant coach in the National Hockey League for for many years, and now you're coming down to the ECHL, and so you've got a guy that's a first year head coach at this level. How you really earn that trust, number one, is your preparation. Those players, they can see you're prepared, um, that they believe in your messaging, and your messaging makes sense to them. But then it's the conversations that aren't hockey conversations. It's pulling guys in. It's talking to them about their home life, their family life, how things are going with their parents. Like how's things. What do you got going on in your life? Because the more that they can, the more that they can feel that they're cared for, the more that they can believe in you as a person. I would say that the more that you're going to be able to get the most out of them as a player. It's not like, is it important? It's maybe it's the most important thing.
Yeah, I would agree 100%, and I'm sure you're very, very good at that. Um, so let's back up now. Let's talk about little Wezzy. Let's talk about growing up, starting out. What sports did you play growing up in Canada? What did that look like as a young kid, like 10 years old?
Yeah, I'm glad we're talking about this, Scotty, because I think it's one of those things I've thought so much about as a coach, and now at this level, playing professionally for 13 years and then now coaching for 5. You've seen so many players that have got to this level, and you see all their paths, and you see the similarities of their paths, and like, why does this guy make it and why does this guy not make it? And so it's something I've thought a lot about, and I love to tell my story about it because it is a little bit unique, I would say. But it starts at a very young age. It starts in a small town of 700 people in Canada, um, where, number one, for sure, everybody plays hockey, but also everybody plays on the baseball team because we have 13 boys that are our age. And so if you don't have a team. And so everybody plays on the baseball team. Everybody plays on the soccer team. Everybody plays on the basketball team. I was on the badminton team. I was on the golf team. I played every single sport. And I say that, and some parents in bigger markets will roll their eyes because they're like, how the heck do you do that? It's impossible. And they're probably right because now I'm living in Cincinnati with my son, and like, I just want him to play basketball and hockey. And well, basketball practices just once a week, and it's Monday at 6 o'clock, and hockey practices twice a week, and it's Monday at 6 o'clock and Thursday at 6 o'clock. And so now on Mondays you have to pick basketball, so now you can only go to the half. Well, we didn't have that problem because the basketball coach has to talk to the hockey coach and say, when is your practice? Because we need to mix them up so that everybody can be at practices. And so I had a very good advantage that way, I think. And so I became a hockey player at the same rate as I became an athlete. And looking back on things now and looking at like the kids in your gym and stuff, I recognize, and with my son now, like, our approach is that importance of like, I if he's going to be successful at something athletically, like, he needs to become an athlete. And I was lucky in that regard. And then access to our arena growing up as a 7-year-old was, to me, was is more important than probably anything that I did. In terms of, like, we didn't have access to a lot of really high end trainers or anything like that. But what we did have access to was our ice at our arena. When I was 7 years old, I was playing on the 7 and under team. I was playing on the 9 and under team, and then I was filling in on the 13 and under team every now and then as well. But then as soon as those games are over, maybe I played at 5 and then 6:30 and then 7:30 at night. Well, then the ice was open, and I'd probably stay out there and shoot around. Or on Friday morning, if school was canceled, uh, everybody would go to the rink, or a bunch of us would go to the rink, and you throw your sticks in the middle of the ice, and we would just play. And you'd play from 9 o'clock in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. And so I think that a positive for me in that environment was that I just became a very much a natural athlete. I naturally had that drive to be good at whatever I was doing. Now, a negative for me growing up in that time of environment was I didn't have access to training. Like we didn't have a Benson sports training, and then going through and watching you with your program, I'm like, man, if I would have had this when I was that age and that environment of not only just the actual training element of it, but being able to walk into that gym as a 13-year-old athlete and look over and you're training with all the incredible athletes that have come through your program, and seeing that as a kid to look up to. Because for me, my goal as a 7-year-old was I hope someday I'm good enough to play for the senior men's team in our town. I walked down and I saw these guys in the locker room after the game, and they'd take them down a tray of hot dogs, and they'd all be drinking a beer, some of them probably smoking a cigarette, and they'd be eating their hot dog after the game, and I'd walk by and they just played a game in front of 300 people, and everybody's cheering for them, and there's a fight in the game, and I was like, man, someday that's gonna be me. Like that was my aspiration. But now you see these kids that are in your gym, and it's like, man, that's Chip Ryman, and that's got, oh man, that guy's playing in as is Major League Baseball. That guy's in the NFL. That guy's like these guys that these have actual people to look up to. I didn't have that, so for me as a young kid, I had some really good positives in being that small town, and there was also some things that I was certainly missing.
So when did it become more than, being part of the men's senior league team? When did you start to realize, okay, there's a future here?
Probably not until, like, I don't know. For me, it was always just next step. It was always the next step. Like when I was even 13, 14 years old or 14 years old, to AAA midget hockey in Manitoba is a high level of hockey at that time. It's the highest level you can be. And it's mostly 16 and 17-year-olds that would play on that. And when I was a 15-year-old, like I didn't think that I was probably going to make the team as a 15-year-old. It's called the Pembina Valley Hawks. And 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 I did make the team as a 15-year-old. And the coach of the team, Rick McConnell, who again I probably owe a lot more than he even realizes to him in terms of like where the trajectory of my hockey world, but he believed in me, and I made that team as a 15-year-old and ended up being one of the like I was a strong player on that team as an underager. And so from there, just, AAA midget, I was like, oh man, this is it. Like I've made it. And then from there, played then as a 16-year-old, and then got the opportunity to play junior A. And I never thought that I was going to be a kid that was like good enough to play junior A. Not a lot of people from our town did. But I did. I made it, and I was junior A, and I was like, man, I've made it. Like this is it. You don't go anywhere other than this, right? And there was a couple of times where there was some NHL scouts before a draft that were in there that it was kind of like, oh, what are these guys doing here, right? But then I started getting the NCAA schools that were knocking on the door and asking me about future plans and getting some more of that. And so that's probably when it started to become real that maybe I could go to college for it. But I never thought anything beyond college. I mean, college hockey, that was probably it. And then I finished my senior year, and when I was kind of on the fence of going. It was actually a former teammate of mine one time, and they were talking about, like, I had an opportunity to go to an AHL training camp, and I just thought I was so far from even that, right? And I remember just the impact on a small conversations can have. But this one former teammate of mine is like, oh, he's like you'll make it for sure. He's like you'll. And I was like, I don't think I'll make it. That's what I thought about myself, that there's no way I'll make that. And he's like, no, he's like, you're good. He's like, you'll make it. And just somebody else's belief in me that kind of led me to think that. And so I was like, "Oh, I'll play this for 1 year." And then it was probably how it all happened was out of joy, to be honest. Like the trajectory of everything was like I had so much joy in what I was doing. I love to play hockey. I love to go to the rink. I love to be there. And at all my levels, I advanced levels just because I loved it.
Yeah. So you played how many years in junior?
2 years. I played as a 17-year-old, which is an underage of juniors, with a team out of Neepawa in the Manitoba Junior Hockey League, and then I played as an 18-year-old. Then my 19 and 20-year-old years, I ended up down in school at Bemidji State University.
Okay. So And that's one thing that I don't really understand. I understand a lot of the high level players go play juniors, and sometimes that bypasses college. Is that correct?
Yeah, college is a really weird world right now. Like there's so much
Well, yeah,
changing that's going on in all sports, right? But college hockey uh as well. But for the most part, players, and it's gotten younger and younger and younger with recruiting, but a lot of players would start as a few at 18 and 19 years old, and then even more so, guys would play juniors until they were 20 years old, and then they could start as a freshman, as a 21-year-old freshman, and then you've got your 4 years of school, which then was 5 years, which maybe is back down to 4 years now. But guys would go to juniors and kind of again just develop into those. It's almost like it's almost like as juniors it's a development league for college,
sure.
and just like anything, some of the kids are ready to go and play at 18 years old, and some aren't, and that was what was great about it. And I went as a 19-year-old year, and my 19-year-old year, and so I gave up 2 years of junior. And looking back, I probably was a year away from from being ready to go, right? I went there, and now all the guys in my class were 21 years old, and they were in the USHL, which the USHL is a lot more. It's a higher level league. The training element is so far beyond what anything like. I went to the gym a little bit, but I didn't go to the gym very often. Like I didn't even have. There wasn't really a gym in my hometown. And then when we went to juniors in Neepawa, like we had access to the gym, and we did a couple of team workouts, but now I get to college, and there's 21-year-old freshman in my same class, and he's been training for 4 or 5 years, and we sit down next to each other on the bench press, and it's pretty embarrassing year one, like how far my development was. And so for me, I think again, just going back to your program, Scotty, like that's one of those things that I see these young athletes go in there, and man, just the advantages that they have, just learning that stuff at such a young age. And yes, strength is one thing, but just seeing these young kids like plyometrics, and seeing these young kids, I've got my 2-year-old right now. I've got like a box jump in the bottom, and I race him around the thing, and I'll race him, and I'll jump up on the box, jump up with him, and just so that we can jump off of it, just so we can practice. And he doesn't realize that I'm training him right now, but he has no idea. He thinks we're just having fun in the basement,
Right.
right? But just all that stuff that goes into it, and just the importance of it. So it was a natural progression for me, but I certainly had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah. So, and you answered this question as far as moving from level to level. One big realization for you was the athleticism and the athletic development, but moving from juniors to college to the professional level, what was like the biggest eye opener or the biggest adjustment you had to make to be able to compete at those new levels?
Strength. I mean, without question, the physical side of it was a huge adjustment for me, just because I was so far behind in that. Because the kids, I was always the best, or amongst the best of all the levels growing up. But at some point, you get to a level where you're no longer the best, and and the kids that, like, now what now that if when they've got the strength on you, not only are they bigger, they're stronger, they're faster. So I had some catching up to do in that. So without question, that side of it was an adjustment for me. The mental side of it, um, in terms of just belief, I would say, like that belief in yourself. You see it all the time. I see it all the time with first year pro players. There's such that fine line between a young player that comes in and just they're unbelievable right off the start, right? And the kid that maybe struggles right off the start. And it doesn't necessarily mean one is better than the others, but maybe one of them, just because of opportunity, played the first weekend, and they had a good first weekend, and now weekend two, they're kind of more established on a certain line or something like that, and they get into a rhythm, and they just have this belief and this confidence in themselves, versus somebody that's come in and struggled, and now you have this doubt in yourself, and so you have to fight that doubt that you have in your mind. So being able to deal with the mental side of things, and being able to get that belief and that confidence. And I always tell people I was very fortunate in my career, that my career was never like this. And I mean fortunate now as a coach, that my career was never like this. It was like where I struggled and I was way far behind everybody. And then my sophomore year, I was outstanding. I had an incredible year my sophomore year. Whereas going into my junior year, I was like the player to watch in the league, preseason player to watch. And it's like, oh man, I'm gonna be the best player in the league this year, to where it didn't go good at the start, and then all of a sudden now I'm struggling, and now all of a sudden I'm finding myself on the lineup as a junior, and then as a senior, developing into a role where it wasn't the same role that I probably had in mind, but it was a defensive role, and I had that high compete level that I could be good defensively, but it was still a little bit like had to grind through it, struggle through it as a senior. Um, and so then going into as a pro, like the almost making the American Hockey League at the start, to where like, oh, I'm going to be a really good pro, right? Going back to juniors and like what, and or sorry, going back to the ECHL, the double A level, and struggling at that level. And why am I struggling? Like, I'm going into this thinking I almost made this level. I should probably lead this league in scoring this year. This is going to be easy, right? And so now I figure it out by year two, by year three, battle through these injuries, and I get to the height of things in Rapid City, and I'm the defenseman of the year, and everything's going great. To then all of a sudden following that up with going through some injuries, um, and struggling on the ice, fighting injuries where I couldn't get my skates tight enough because my back was so sore that tightening my skates was a challenge, right? And being told by doctors that this is something that you're just going to deal with throughout your life, and then being able to battle through that and kind of reestablish a career from that, and deal with the new age of social media, where like I've got you've got fans that are, you know, it's great when you're reading this stuff on social media and everybody loves you, and man, this player's the best. And then all of a sudden now the negative comments are starting, and this player is brutal and we need to get rid of him, and fighting with that side of it mentally. And I know that's kind of long-winded on that, but it was the positive for me with that was that I experienced it all and I fought through it. And that mental side of the game for me was without question the biggest challenge, not only at the start, but throughout the whole career, and the highs and lows. And going back to that for me now with coaching our players and our first year players, I think it's a huge strength of me as a coach is that I can recognize I can recognize what these kids are going through, and I can relate to it. And I have some type of a similar story where I can say, hey, listen, like I've got some advice for you here, and you're going to have to learn it your hard way. But hopefully I can help you get there faster because I can relate to you a little bit, and I can kind of help you to talk you through it and what you're going through.
Yeah. And every high level athlete that I've ever worked with, has that mental side, because once you get to the NCAA level or beyond that, everybody's good. Everybody's good. So, the thing that's going to separate you at that point is your ability to deal with those ups and downs. And then, the other part of that is everything that you just explained is why sports are so awesome, because they teach us so many lessons and prepare us for the rest of our lives. Because I mean, you're a little bit different to where you got to play your sport for a long time and now you get to coach it. But most people, that sports is such a brief fraction of their life, but you learn so many valuable lessons from all those ups and downs. And I knowing you, I know that you grind through everything and approach everything with that attitude that you're going to accomplish it. And that's a great segue into us talking about the athletic development side and your training. Um, because of the fact that you were so determined, so committed, worked so hard, you were probably an athlete that made me more nervous than anybody else when it came to, potentially overtraining, you know, and so I kind of want to talk about that part of it. And you and I, you came in and you worked with a lot of our college athletes, and then towards the end, it was you and I training together, and always kind of upping and well, we did this last time, let's do this time, and always going kind of that extra mile. And I was always concerned with you, and I feel like as you got older as an athlete, you started to kind of back off that a little bit. But where is that fine line of grinding and really pushing the body to its limits? And then you talked about, geez, I was spending 2 hours a day rolling out on the floor. And, there, I agree mentally and pushing the body, but there's got to be a limit. And you kind of push right up to that limit a lot. And looking back, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, it, that's definitely that it's definitely a personality thing that's me is my and there's positives to it and it's helps me in a lot of ways for sure and it's also it's it's a detrimental like once I'm doing something I'm all in and so what's really important for me and I think this is important for all athletes maybe more so for me is that is having that system in place, right? I look back on our later in the years, those late years, like having um, that 4 week plan out that we would have, like, hey, this is our plan for the next 4 weeks. And one of the things for me with it is I knew I was never going to have a day that wasn't filled in. Like for me, every single day of that was going to fit filled in, and even so much up to a detriment of like, okay, well, if I missed 2 days because I was sick, well, then I'm overtraining probably Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to make sure that like that day from Monday and Tuesday didn't go on, like I didn't miss that workout. And so there definitely there's no question there needs to be a balance with it. I think the thing that probably makes me fearful um, with talking about that stuff with our athletes is that I think there's more athletes that use that balance um, use the term balance of taking things lighter. And I think the one thing that really sets athletes apart at this level is their drive. Like the guys that just have that fire and just have that hunger. And there's so many players that they make this level and they're good and this will just be kind of the highest level that they make it because they've got everything else that other athlete has, but they don't have that fire and that drive and the fire and the drive not only when they show up at the rink and how they put in at practice and the way they compete every day at practice, but also that drive to have a system in their life, that drive to eat right, that to have the nutrition dialed in their life, right? That drive to go to bed at 8 o'clock. That do you stay up and watch shows? Do you go on your phone? Because um, it's pretty easy to be like, oh man, I'm gonna watch 4 episodes of my Netflix show tonight. Whereas like the guys are like, hey, I know that this is what I need to do is I need to go to bed early and because we talked about this earlier, but everybody is good. And so it's the marginal gains, right? It's the what can you do a little bit better every year and what can you do a little bit better than the other person that sets you apart. Um so kind of tying it back into that training, I think I never had like I probably took it to the extreme on the training on that other end, but I do think that like if you're going to take it to the extreme one way or the other, to try and always push it to that
Yeah.
way.
Well, do you also think, I mean, we did some crazy stuff, some really hard grinding workouts, and we had an awesome group at the time that, they were all college athletes. But do you feel like, pushing your body to that limit then carries over to that mental side and that mental approach?
Yeah, I think it does for sure. And again, for me, again, it's probably just the way that I was wired, but like the hardest part of those workouts for me was showing up. And I don't mean that showing up was difficult. I just mean that like once I was there,
Yeah.
it was awesome. It was fun. Like I loved it. And so having that, having that structure in place for somebody where it's like, okay, like we're working out at 10 o'clock on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, we'll see you there, and then just making sure you're there, right? And then you talked about it with that trust, then like it's finding that person that you believe in and the systems that they have in place for you. Um, and then putting in the work. And so, and not everybody's wired that way. I mean,
No.
we finished our exit meetings with our players this year, and I always try and get feedback from our guys. And these are professional athletes. These guys have trained all their life, and so you would think that they're all very similarly wired. And in our exit meetings, we'd ask about our strength and conditioning element of our season, and we have a guy that runs our programming here, and we'll have one player that will say, listen, like I think that this year my feedback for that would be like it was just too much, like especially game weeks, like we're lifting too much, and I think we need to scale it back. And then the very next kid that comes in and say, hey, listen, like I liked the programming, but it just wasn't near hard enough. Like we need to be doing more, you know? And so everybody's wired a little bit differently that way. And so I guess probably my advice for that stuff is you have to number one, have a system in place and have a program in place. And then uh, and have somebody you believe in. And then you have to show up with it and
Yeah.
whatever that program is. And not everybody's going to be the same, but you have to show up.
Yeah. At the end of the day, consistency wins.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about, I deal with a lot of young hockey players. And, we last year, Rushmore Thunder won a national title. Reader's kid leading the way. So they've had some success. So you see these young kids wanting to, growing up, they want to be a part of that. Um, I get a hold of hockey players when they're 13, 14, 15 years old and they've been playing for 4 or 5 years. Their bodies are pretty messed up already. Just that skating motion and the way hockey players develop, it changes the body. I think long term, you see a lot of hip injuries and things like that. Looking back what advice would you give to young hockey players from a development perspective to help keep them healthy, to be able to play beyond, those young years.
I didn't probably start like probably one of the biggest detriments to my career later in my career was when I had injuries at 25 years old. It was had way more to do with what I wasn't doing when I was 16 years old, when I was 20 years old, when I was 22 years old. Um, and I never stretched. I never foam rolled. All that stuff I talked to you about later in my career that I had to do because at that point you just realize you have to do it. I wasn't doing it. And so um, what I think about and that team you're talking about in particular, that Rushmore Thunder team that 2 years in a row they haven't lost a game, like those kids are good. And in South Dakota, those kids are good now. But what people don't see is those are the kids that are doing that now. Those were kids that when they were 6, 7, 8 years old, like those are the kids that were in every one of my camps in the summer. Like those kids showed up to
Mhm.
our spring skill skates. Those kids showed up to fall conditioning. Those kids showed up to the stuff in the summer, right? Like the that was the payoff that everybody sees, right? And I think with careers and with young kids, that's the thing that people are very reactionary, right? In terms of some of this stuff. And like for instance, right now I've got my son doing some stuff. We've got a skating treadmill that's been put into our practice facility here, and just talking with Tad O'Had, who is my coach in Kansas City, like he talked about like just the benefits that he saw with skating treadmills with the young athletes that he worked with that ended up playing in the NHL years down the road. But a lot of these kids and these families that will join into that type of a stuff, like they see the results of other kids at 18 years old and, oh, what have they been doing? Well, they've been doing this, right? And so my recommendation with any of this stuff with young athletes is like whatever you see the pros doing and that kind of stuff, like don't don't do that stuff when you get there. You know, like get ahead of that kind of stuff. If it's I love that some of those hockey athletes are training with you because when you and I started, we had no hockey athletes. We had no, I don't think there was any young hockey players training with us at that time. Well,
Yeah,
I
and
know there wasn't,
a lot of those Rushmore Thunder kids, especially on those, those teams the last 2 years, train with us and have been with
right?
us for quite a while.
But
And
and that's the first wave of that programming, right? Like when I was there and you and I were started this 12, 15 years ago, or maybe it's longer than that now, but uh there wasn't the hockey players doing that,
no,
and so that's what I believe is those young kids is like is become an athlete, start becoming an athlete, and whether that's playing multiple sports, but train yourself to be an athlete when you're younger because the work that you're putting in as a 13-year-old, as a 12-year-old, it's going to pay off when you're much older. And I think Ryman with the, is it the Cardinals now? Yeah, like he is such a perfect example of that because like you and I remember when he was in the gym. I mean, that guy's a beast now. But when that
yeah,
guy was in the gym, like it was like he was that I don't want to speak like he was that the awkward little
awkward. Yeah,
yeah, the kid that showed up every single day. He showed up and he showed up and he put the work in at 12 years old, at 13 years old, that now you see it and it's like, holy smokes, right? Like it's cool to see.
yeah. And a lot of these kids, whether it's hockey or any other sport out there, and you kind of briefly touched on this, how the NCAA is changed so much. You know, none of these major decisions that the NCAA has made and instituted over the last 5 years have been to the benefit of the high school athlete trying to get recruited. Everything that's been done over the last 5 years is benefiting the current college athletes. So now you've got roster limitations, you've got they're approving a 5th year of eligibility. So these kids that are coming out over the next 2 3 years, it's going to be the toughest it's ever been to move on to the NCAA level in any sport. And so if you think you're going to do that by just simply playing your sport, there's no chance because now you're competing against 22 and 23-year-old men and women who have been in a gym and been in a weight room for a lot of years. And if you think you're going to bypass that step and still make it to the NCAA or any college level, you're kind of kidding yourself. And I don't know that a lot of athletes, a lot of young athletes and parents understand that. It's just a completely different.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, they think that like so many of the families here that like, okay, well, if I want my kid to be a good hockey player, well, I just need to get him in more hockey and I need to get him in AAA, AAA, and we need to travel all over the country for that. Like my son in Cincinnati was probably one of the top few 7 or 8 year olds in the city of Cincinnati last year. And and I was upset that there was no house program for him to move up to in the next. Like they only have like these kids they can go to AAA, and I'm like, he's 8 years old. Like I don't want him driving to
Right.
Columbus and our family going to Dayton and stuff because like yes, competition like there's an element that it's important, but like these kids, my belief is these kids need to be on the ice, need to be getting their reps, they need to be playing, they need to be having fun. But if you are going to be successful at this down the road, it's not about playing against better competition at that age. It's about becoming an athlete. And so I'm like with my son, it's getting him introduced into that. He's 7 now, but like that stuff with the training. And I think one thing that maybe scares some families is the when you think about training you think about being on a bench press and lifting weight and a squat rack and lifting weight, right? And that's some people's vision of it. And so unless you've been in that gym and you recognize that like, oh, it's actually a kid doing single leg hops from uh, hula hoop to hula hoop and working on catching their balance when they're going from side to side, right?
Mhm.
And working on um, change of direction and racing and uh, jumping off of a box and decelerating, like all that stuff that goes into it that actually is the stuff that's important and pays off to train them to be an athlete that people don't realize is actually what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And And I do think, parents, they are fearful. There's, the old, this perception that you shouldn't lift weights until after puberty, and that, it'll crush your growth plates. And it's all nonsense. There's no science behind it. There's actually a lot of positives to strength training in adolescence, but that doesn't mean there's a bar on your back and you're you're lifting heavy. I mean, you could be holding on to a dumbbell or a medicine ball, and it's all about progression and doing the right things the right way. And so that's such a good point to make. Um, okay, so what we're going to do here as we start to close up is I close some of my shows with a speed round of questions. So I
Okay.
got to get you thinking fast, and so you're not allowed to take a lot of time on these. You just got to shoot me an answer. I got to put my old man glasses on because I'm blind.
I gotta
Um,
preface this here, Scotty, tell you that I'm not gonna be good at this because I'm a thinker on
I
this
know,
stuff,
I know.
and so
That's
this is so we're outside the comfort zone here, but I'm not,
exactly, and
but
that's
we're gonna kill it though.
all right. You ready to roll?
Ready to roll.
All right. Favorite hockey city you played in?
Boise, Idaho.
Toughest player you ever faced?
Trevor Gillies
Okay. One skill every young player should master.
showing up.
What's the most underrated trait in athletes?
Confidence.
Favorite pregame music?
Rock and roll. 80s rock probably.
Hardest coach you ever played for?
Hardest. Oh, Brad Ralph.
Okay. Biggest lesson pro hockey taught you?
Perseverance and shutting out outside noise.
One training method you swear by?
Stretching. Like
Okay. Best advice you ever received from a coach?
just play. Just play.
Awesome. Well, Riley, I really appreciate you coming on the show. Like we talked about, we try to get together once a year, and that didn't happen last year. So I guess this takes the place of that. Been, a great run knowing you as an athlete and as a coach, but becoming pretty close friends with you, and just a guy that I've always looked up to because you've always done things the right way and you've always treated people the right way, and that means a lot to me. So appreciate you being on, and wish you continued luck in Cincinnati.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Scotty, and it goes. I told my coaching staff here when I told them I was going to do this. It's like I was telling them while going on this podcast, but you're a guy that I owe a lot of my career path to, and you probably don't realize it when you're just showing up every day and being there, right? But to be able to extend my career as long as I have, there's no way that I do that without the training that we did together, and like I had said, it was never, it was showing up, and then it was just fun. Like I love doing it. Not that there wasn't hard days, and there certainly was, but I enjoyed every second of it, and it's really incredible to see what you built there with your program. And I show people all the time, the people that I work with here, I'll show them little details that you have about your program, the banners of the successful athletes on your wall, which to me is just like, man, what an incredible thing where these kids, they see like these larger than lives, and it's that inspiration every day to be like, I want to be that guy someday. You've done such a good job with that program there, and I'll never forget when we started in your basement with the weighted vest and the complex workouts
Yeah.
year one, and just what it's evolved into from here, and the amount of athletes that you've had a positive impact and really life-changing impact on. And so thanks for doing what you do. And I look forward to watching the continued success of your podcast and also the gym back in South Dakota.
Yeah. One last thing. I don't know if you noticed, but this Benson sports training hat, kind of your team colors, huh?
Yeah, it is.
I'm gonna
Yeah, it
have to
is.
send you one.
I would love that. I would
So
absolutely love that.
I'll
Yeah.
get you to text me your address, and I'll get one in the mail.
All right.
So Riley, continued
Mm.
luck, and we'll stay in touch, and you have a great day.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I appreciate being on.